Hello, I'm Greg Thomas from Genesis, and welcome to Level Up CX Live, where we discuss the biggest trends and challenges facing customer service and customer experience. Today, we're going to be joined by Aron Meyer, Digital Workplace Solutions Architect at Unisys. He'll be sharing how Unisys continues to transform customer experience by using the success and data-backed insights from ongoing AI initiatives to build momentum and continually evolve their CX practice. So let's bring Aron out. Aron, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning and good afternoon.
So let's just start off with you sharing a little bit with the audience about yourself. Tell us about Unisys, your role there, and a bit about your own background, please.
Certainly. So Unisys is a fascinating company with a 150-year history. We are a technology managed service provider, so we care for the technology solutions for for large enterprise scale customers around the world. And for me, I have over 30 years experience in this business and in particular around contact centers and customer service. And so my current role at Unisys, I'm a solution manager. So I take all the wonderful, innovative ideas that our associates come up with around the world, and I package those into innovative go-to-market offerings.
Cool. Thank you again for being here. And so we'll get into sort of CX and what it means for Unisys. So let's just start there. How do you think about at Unisys approaching CX strategy, right? It's a pretty complex world out there now. Lots of channels, lots of potential touch points, lots of technologies. Like where do you start? What's your top line on strategy?
So the first thing really is to take care of the customers, right? Ultimately, if you take care of your customers, everything else tends to take care of itself. And so that's kind of the overriding philosophy. But just as you described, with so many different contact channels today, is it really becomes kind of everything, everywhere, all at once type situation. And so you really have to be where your customers want to be. Across all those channels of voice and email and various digital channels, socials, things like that. And with and in particular with our kind of business, but I think in general, we really don't want to force our customers down any one in particular channel. We really don't have I don't want to say kind of that luxury, but again, it is about meeting them where they need to be, because ultimately we're trying to get, in our business to business relationship, we're trying to get our customers back to work, right? So they're often calling us for issues or incidents, or they're calling us for service requests. And so, so we've got to, kind of tailor for each one of those channels and try to deliver a consistent experience across voice, across chat, across those other digital interfaces.
Yeah. And I think, one thing you're sort of hinting at in that is that when CX leaders think about channels and even about omni-channel, for example, it's not about everything, despite the everything all everywhere all at once. It's what makes sense and how do you sort of meet folks where they are. So let's pivot to the topic that continues to be on every CX leader's mind, which is AI. And how, I know that at Unisys y'all are using AI and CX and have got some pretty interesting stories to share, which we'll get into as we go along. But starting out, just like, how are you leveraging AI to power your CX, and like, what's your philosophy as to how you think about AI as one of the tools in the CX toolkit?
Sure. So I feel like, one of the first things is particularly with a lot of hype, and things that continues around AI, and for good reason, is that we don't really view AI as the destination, but it's part of the journey. And so, our key, kind of key drivers for us is, number one, making sure that we're using AI to serve the customers, right? It's not a line of defense to be able to keep customers out of live support or things like that. it really is to serve their needs, right? How are we how are we serving that objective for them to place that order or get that get that problem solved or that question answered, is really the outcome goal. And sometimes that best service is your live agent. So the second part of that is really enabling our associates, enabling our contact center agents, and supporting them with the AI technologies. So whether that's summarizing the activity that the digital assistant had before it got there to help make sure that they're not asking the same questions, that they're able to leap right into those next steps, or whether it's surfacing the knowledge content for them, doing these kind of things. So it's it's supporting users, enabling enabling our agents, and then ultimately really trying to build this overall feedback loop, right? So we're all building this foundational stuff, as AI continues to improve, as we all continue to build our trust in AI. And so so it really is about this cycle of and knowledge is really key to it, right? So this cycle of feeding automated knowledge to enrich that whole ecosystem, right? So it is about feeding the digital assistants, but it's feeding back into our live agent supports, and identifying gaps, and really considering the audience, for those content, for that content as well. So using AI to drive insights, right? So that's another really big thing. One of the examples that I like to bring up is, through this knowledge evaluation and, examining outcomes, one of the things that our AI surfaced for us was like there was two different fixes that we had for a particular customer that was in their, in the knowledge base. And one of those was a quick fix, it was much faster for the technicians, but ultimately it resulted in reoccurrence in 2 or 3 weeks. They'd be calling us back with the same thing. So part of what the AI surfaced was this conflict saying, wait a minute, I see these two different resolutions, and and one of them doesn't have a repetitive, a repetitive result. So I think it's things like that that you really want to focus on with with AI.
Well, and I think that's a great example too of something that both may seem a little bit simple. AI finds something that maybe the folks hadn't seen about, these two possible solutions, but also pretty profound, right? Because it's um, it's introduced a way to think differently about how you're surfacing that customer that you may not have come across, just with human agents, that's actually going to deliver these longer term benefits. And it's a good example of that idea of like, how do we take the data that we're gleaning from all of these interactions and actually plow them back in to get something better than what we had before. Yeah.
Exactly.
Um, So, AI has been with us in CX for a few years now, right? Reflecting back just the past few years, conversational AI, generative AI, we're very clearly in the era or age of AI and CX. And we've moved past hype and science projects to people delivering real business value. And I think as technologies mature, there's often this, to use Gartner's phrase, this trough of disillusionment, right? We get the promise and then we're leveling off, and maybe it's we're there with AI, maybe not. Where do you see AI and CX relative to that notion of hype and business value? And how do you keep yourself, your stakeholders engaged as we go through that sort of cycle of disillusionment and hype and the like?
Yeah. So yeah, I think I think their representation is great, and as you said, that trough of disillusionment, is everybody starts or with their first kind of AI implementation, and you see some early results, right? It's impactful right away. You continue the excitement, and then as you try to grab for that next layer, then it's not quite as impactful, right? And so so you start scratching your head going, wait a minute, this wasn't just the magic wand that solved everything. I just hit the AI toggle switch and magic happened, right? And so so it really is about sticking with the program, And for me, it's about really combating that with data, right? This is where your insights and your analytics come into play, and you start really, number one is looking back at those successes, right? And reminding folks that, hey, even though it didn't just magically solve everything, look at the accomplishments that we've had so far. And then also it's going to reveal those next places where you can really focus your energies and have that next impact. So so like some of the things that we saw, for example, is we kind of hit that first trough, but in reflecting back was saying, look, um, we saw when we moved our digital assistant service to a generative AI service, we saw a 36% improvement in user engagement, right? So the friendliness, the usefulness
Wow.
of it, immediately people started to interact with it more. They stopped, immediately human, 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 bypass kind of thing. They started giving it a chance, and giving it a chance also meant they started to get the better results out of it as well. And so, just in those deployments, even in mature environments where we had good assistance for years, that took tons of effort to do, we were seeing like 13 to 16% improvement just in those, just within the first quarter of those early deployments. And so, while that isn't, magic happens and everything gets solved, those are pretty significant results that that you're driving in your business, pretty impactful. And so and when you think about those additional opportunities, and the better that you're serving people, the more that's going to create that positive feedback loop, and the more they engage with it, that's all those more opportunities that you get to solve more things for them, solve
Yeah.
more, sell more, right? Whatever your business is. So
Yeah.
you're really trying to build those foundations of things. You know, a service that's long term, that's built to last. And again, for me, that data driven analytics part that keeps you driving forward with the program is kind of your chance to, for your business, your chance to be the hero there, right?
Yeah. Well, and again, I love that idea of taking the data and using it to just kind of continually refine and improve, because you're right, you're not necessarily going to see the hockey stick kind of improvements indefinitely. Like that's just
Exactly.
not reality. So how do you find those places, informed by data, to say we can keep making improvements? Because like I'd take 10% year on year, right, in my 401k, right? That's pretty good,
Mhm.
so if we can continually improve, then 18 months down the line or whatever, you look back and you say, oh, that's actually a lot of material improvement, though it may not have felt like that whoosh that we saw at the very beginning. Yeah. So you talked a little bit in that about kind of metrics and measurement, and one of the things that we hear a lot when we talk to customers and other CX kind of practitioners is this idea that the way that we sort of measure things, as we as an industry are sort of moving from, if you will, sort of a contact center mentality to more of a customer experience mentality, that we need to change and improve the ways that we measure. So when you think about what you're measuring and how you think about measuring in this era of AI and CX, like what have you learned, and what feels maybe different or impactful to you when it comes to data and measurement?
Yeah. So just as you said, experience management is huge, right? And so, and experience management is really big for us. We're heavy into XLAs and things like that, and really, it comes back to serving the customer and measuring those outcomes, and trying to measure and monitor your impacts on the experience end to end. There's often a tendency to focus on silos, and you can pick up your gains through those detailed silos, but you can't lose sight of the end to end goal, and what your goal is for your customers' outcomes. And so, specifically digging into these services, things like engagement is actually a great metric, right? It's a way of telling you how well people are consuming your service, how well they're enjoying your service. And so, things like that engagement improvement, is 36%. That's more business opportunities for you. Again, whether that's a sales channel or a service channel, that's big in terms of improvements. One of the other things that we noticed in our pilot programs before we went out to prod was that we've spent so many years with, and frankly, it's still out there today. I called a company earlier this weekend, and their experience was terrible. I wish I could send them a note somehow and say I can help you. But 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 we're kind of so trained that with so many like years of bad IVRs and then chatbots that are really that robot that's meant to be that first line of defense and trying to guide you into these silos to get you to stay away from the humans.
Yeah, to
That
deflect, right?
Yeah, exactly, to deflect, right? Not resolve, not fulfill, right, but to deflect. And I
Mhm.
go, that's and so as consumers we have that expectation. So what we saw was a third of the users in those initial pilots, if they asked the assistant the first question, that first question they asked, if it didn't understand them or it didn't give them a good answer, that was it. They gave up. They never came back and gave it a second chance. There was confirmation bias. I knew this was going to be just as terrible as the old one and not as useful and whatever. And so, for me, it's really important to make sure not to speed these things out, but to really do your testing, test those scenarios, make sure that you've got the right knowledge content, you've got, you're able to do things meaningful again for your customers, because you're not just trying to deflect them. They're going to end up at a competitor, they're going to end up in another channel. Is make sure that you're doing something meaningful so that they come back. And one of the things we saw in the generative that was again I think helping to drive that engagement and drive those better fulfillment results was immediately out of the box it was 7 times better at understanding that first question or understanding user questions as they engage with it versus the legacy systems. And so that's part of, for us, and we talk about metrics and the things that we're looking for, that really that became like a baseline to us, was saying, okay, when we're deploying this new service for one of our customers, first off, we're not measuring things by volumes of, how many knowledge articles do I have? How many, this do I have? How many that do I have? But rather, how much coverage do I have? Right? Can I understand at least 70%? Do I have 70% of the knowledge coverage when I run my scenarios through my assistant? Does it understand at least 70% of what they're asking for? And if they do, then there's our MVP, right? There's our minimum viable that we can release this and then start using those feedback loops and those cycles to, to continue to move it up from there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to think about it, right? Because I think you're right. I mean, certainly in my own experience, um, I've been shopping for a particular kind of service in my personal life and going to lots of different competitors. It's pretty clear they all use a pretty similar back end. And so I'm like, I know what the phone tree is and I figured it all out. And what I'm really looking for is what consumers consistently tell us in our research, right? Which is fix my issue and fix it fast. And I don't particularly care whether it's a human or an AI or some combination thereof, if I get my answer, if I get my resolution. And so thinking about as we're deploying as an industry, new types of technology, keeping that kind of idea in mind that what you started with this, right? What does the consumer need? What are we doing for the customer? And getting to that minimum viable product idea so that it is actually going to be a net benefit to the customer and not just, a piece of technology that we're deploying and kind of hoping that it's going to work. Yeah. So what would you suggest for folks who are watching, who are, I doubt there's anyone watching who's, not yet taken a step on the AI journey in CX. But for getting what you've called AI ready and sort of being in a place where you can kind of continue that journey towards delivering these kinds of experiences through technology.
Certainly. So I'm really going to come back to one of my earlier themes, which is the people side, right? So so number one is getting your people ready. Unisys has done a fantastic job in investing in our associates in terms of training, right? Making sure that everybody understands AI technology, and understands the evolution of it. So there's a continuous training aspect as things continue to evolve. And I think that's really important, so that your entire organization is behind what you're doing. It's not just some black box that they don't understand or something that they're fearful of, but rather something that they understand how it works and they can embrace it. So I think that's, for me, that's the biggest thing. The second thing is really, and I kind of call this a little bit of like weeding the garden, right? Is looking at things like your source content. Humans have been really great at, um, our humans are really great at like filtering things out. So when you go to that SharePoint, you go to that knowledge base and you see something that may be a little bit out of date, or it doesn't apply anymore, or these kinds of things, they're going through that filtration process for you. And interestingly, we often don't do a good job of measuring the time that's spent doing that, right? So there's some other soft benefits that go with this, but really it's starting to weed that garden and make sure you've got really good content. So as you start to feed that to your different AI services, it's got the best information available, to do whatever it is, that task that you're asking it to do. And so, I think the other thing is making sure that you have the right telemetry in place. We talked about it before about, measuring things, measuring the experience, measuring those elements of engagement, measuring how many things you're truly fulfilling when people are engaging with the bot, right? Are they starting off in your assistant in one place and ending up in another channel because they got frustrated, right? And so all these kinds of things. And then, lastly, I think is taking those small steps, right? Start small, do something, and then build on that success. And, frankly, for us, again, one of our learning lessons over time was making sure that we were bringing that back into our business, because, as we're delivering things to customers, the people side don't always see that, right? They don't always see those successes that are happening up front. So coming back and sharing that with your own organization, hey, this is what this service is doing. These are the outcomes. Here's the feedback that we got from customers, or here's the feedback we got from our other associates or employees, right? That kind of thing. So, and then never stop looking for that next opportunity.
Yeah. And I really like that idea of bringing the successes back in, because, we all, we work in organizations that serve a customer base, and really understanding like what is this doing? What is my impact? What is our team's impact? What is the impact of these investments we're making? I think that's both like really insightful to bring back to people, but probably pretty motivational too, for like, oh, this is making a difference in the lives of our customers. Um, so, Aaron, as we wrap up here, what's next for Unisys when you think about your CX journey, your AI journey? Where are you going from here?
Yeah. So, so pardon me. So, the first thing is that continuous organizational change, right? AI is having an impact on all of us in different ways. They're having an impact on different parts of your business in different ways. And so, don't underestimate the effort and the impact of that organizational change and addressing that. For us, as well, it's very much about continuing to build around AI enabled automation, right? Things, um, there's still a lot of, I hate to use the term low hanging fruit, but there's a lot of opportunities out there that AI is able to do things in a lot better ways and with a lot less effort than what we had to in the past with old tools with really heavy, orchestration and things like that. And so, now we can do these things, a lot quicker with AI Studio and stuff like that. And so, um, ultimately, it's also, not just those front end fulfillments, but bringing that back around to your associates again as well, because the humans are going to have to handle the harder stuff, right? So the way that the way that that we set expectations, the way we measure, the way we train, the kind of toolkits that we get to enable the people is supporting that shift. That the stuff the humans are going to get is going to be the harder stuff, the more involved stuff, and often the more critical stuff, right? The most
Yeah.
important things. And so, so it's really important that we support them. That's another big piece of it. And and then again, the last thing is just continuing to work with our customers on building those foundational steps for themselves as well, because we have different customers in different states. People who are just starting their AI journey, and people that are much deeper into it, and then really trying to lean way far into it. So um,
Yeah, that's great advice, and a really good sort of peek into the future. Well, Aron Meyer from Unisys, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise, your strategies with us and with the audience. Thanks to everyone who tuned in as well. For more on the latest in CX, you can scan the QR code that's going to pop up here on the screen. There's also a link in the comments below. You can follow Genesis on LinkedIn to get notified about the next Level Up CX Live. And you can, of course, sign up for our bi-weekly newsletter where we share the latest in customer experience. Please like and share, and we'll see you on the next Level Up CX Live. Thank you so much.